Gamers would always come back. That's what the games industry banked on every single time something didn't go as planned. No matter how broken the launch was, how aggressive the microtransactions were, no matter how hollow the experience ended up being, gamers would always come back. I mean, Call of Duty has been slapping their fanbase around like a redheaded stepchild for almost 2 decades now, yet they always came back, right? The idea was always, as long as the marketing was loud enough, if the paying customer didn't escape the storm of social media posts up until launch, and the brand name was recognizable enough, people would always come back. But these days, that doesn't seem to be the case. Something has changed, alright? The air around this sort of thing, it feels different now. They're starting to panic because the one thing they always counted on, that being blind loyalty, is disappearing. For the better part of the last decade or so, major publishers, your EAs, the Activisions, even Xbox or PlayStation, they all chase the exact same formula. Make games, not always great, but just make them. Sure, they aren't unforgettable experiences like the higher echelons of games before them, but that's okay, cause that wasn't the goal anymore. It was something else now. It became less about telling a story and drawing you in and giving you something made by humans cause they wanted to make it. Now, it was all about funneling you to the cash shop, the engagement loops, and the ecosystems and more, all designed to extract as much time as money as humanly possible. Instead of crafting real, complete experiences from the get-go for you to enjoy that were worth the money that you would spend on them, it became more important to instead ship the idea of a platform instead. Sure, yeah, the games were unfinished at launch. They would lack basic features that previous releases already had at launch. Yeah, okay, they had microtransactions, and most of the armor sets that looked cool were locked behind paywalls. Looking at you, Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed, or even Diablo with Blizzard. But you see, before they did this, because people would tolerate it, they took the dunking and getting pissed on mentality to get to the good gameplay that was promised. And the idea was always, they'll come back, as long as the updates keep trickling in. And it worked for a while, actually a long time, but this was only really because players in general just believed, stupidly I gotta admit, because I believed this too for a time, that eventually things would just work themselves out. They would course correct, right? Yeah, this game is bad now, but they promised with a shiny trailer that it'll get better, guys. We just gotta wait 6 months and then buy into it. Just trust the process. Why would they lie to us like that? The broken launches of games were instead seen as temporary mistakes, but don't worry, okay? The next game, the next season of content, that would save it. It will be amazing, okay? Just have faith. Don't be a naysayer. But after years upon years of disappointment after disappointment, this illusion that they built up, like they were Mysterio or something trying to convince you something to be real, has completely shattered instead. You see, the real crisis that publishers these days are facing right now, it isn't the sales of their games or making sure there's enough content. No. You see, the real crisis is the erosion of trust, and once that's broken, it's hard to get it back. Because everyone who plays games are no longer willing to give the industry that's been spitting on them from above the benefit of the doubt anymore. Every unfinished launch, every cynical battle pass, every hollow release designed around grinding and live in our world BS instead of great content day one. This has all just slowly but surely chipped away at the relationship between those who make games and those who play them. And it's reaching a breaking point because people aren't pre-ordering as much out of blind loyalty anymore. Well, unless your name is From Software, then sure, you have nothing to worry about, I guess. But if you're not From Software, you're probably sweating in your suit pretty much all of the time because people aren't buying the empty promises anymore. They're instead waiting. They're watching from the sidelines, and most importantly, they are now walking away when something doesn't meet the most bare bones of expectations that they have anymore. That's the part that terrifies the industry the most too, by the way, because their entire business model was built on the assumption that players wouldn't do that. So what we're seeing right now is something bigger than some backlash over over a character design or whatever else. Instead, it's rejection of soulless corporate design and a rejection of games that are built around monetization first and gameplay second. Maybe even third or fourth down the line, who are we kidding? But players are now no longer interested in the hollow experiences that they've been promised for years, all disguised behind expensive marketing campaigns. Instead, what's actually getting rewarded is real craftsmanship. Games that feel like someone actually cared about making them. Worlds that people feel as if they're lived in. Systems that exist not to manipulate the metrics, but to create fun. And when people find those sorts of experiences, they're supporting it very passionately so. Some games have done this lately are stuff like Resident Evil, of course, and Slay the Spire 2. In Resident Evil Requiem's case, in case you don't know, they sold over 5 million copies already, probably higher now since that number was announced days ago at this point. And recently, as you can see here from Gaming Bible, Requiem is getting new content developed for the game. One of the things being developed is brand new story content. We have no idea what this will entail yet, but based on the same leaks that leaked there would be story content to begin with, apparently it's going to focus heavily on you playing as Leon, which I think is a great idea for obvious reasons. The three things being added are photo mode, a new mini game which Capcom hasn't confirmed what that is yet, and finally a story expansion. If I had to guess, it's very likely that mini game is probably the Mercenaries mode, because I mean they did all this work on making Leon's gameplay, have all these cool finishers and aura farming and stuff, and you're not gonna give us Mercenaries? Yeah, I doubt that. Either way, as you might suspect, this news was met with resounding positivity because Capcom doesn't really screw over their customers to the same degree as others. Well, that is unless you played Monster Hunter Wilds on PC at launch last year, then yeah, you got cooked and bamboozled. But besides that rare blunder from them, everything else has been mostly good. Then there's Slay the Spire 2, which has been killing it on Steam alone with over 500,000 concurrent players, not counting other platforms. And Megacrit, that's the makers of Spire 2, are likely very happy with the results. And yet Slay the Spire 2 is not nickel and diming, but people love it so much that players would actually love to be nickel and dimed more. Like, look at this from Eurogamer. Slay the Spire 2 developer refuses to rely on microtransactions or DLC packs to make quick cash, despite some players threatening to buy all and any cosmetics we may ever release. So the reason why Megacrit refuses to do paid cosmetics is very simple. As seen here, the co-founder said it straight up in an interview. They're microtransaction haters. They loathe the entire concept of it and want no part in it. Their words, not mine. And because they hate the very thing that has destroyed most goodwill with most companies, they have, as also seen here from Eurogamer, exploded in player numbers. 500,000 people playing an indie game at release is crazy, but it is well deserved. Like, look, not all cosmetic microtransaction stuff is bad in theory. I do get it that live service games need some form of payment to keep the lights on months after release. I'm not stupid. But oftentimes it does cross a line that feels predatory and it ruins the experience. Something I like about Resident Evil 2 Remake, for example, which I've been replaying a lot lately. I beat both A Pass for Leon and Claire. I'm currently doing Claire's B run, is how the game is not huge. Raccoon City Police Department is a quality made game environment. It's not the size of even a single small town in Assassin's Creed by comparison. Yet the rooms each feel more important than the last as each resource you can find becomes invaluable to your survival. How the left side of the police department has the library. It also has the locker room where you gotta go find the keyboard keys so you can unlock the various upgrades that are locked behind its lockers. You really need that inventory upgrade that's on the left side, but you need the 2 button. As Claire at the back of that room as well, there's a grenade launcher waiting for you. If you play as Leon, it's a shotgun. But then if you go upstairs, you gotta open that weapons locker room because there's a submachine gun that Claire can use behind that locked gate as well. But then you gotta make sure you also keep the STARS badge because you can use it below in the basement to then unlock a silencer for the SMG2. It's really cool. The point is you need every advantage you can get in a game like this because the horrors that await you need to be Amazon Prime to their deathbeds as soon as possible. The B run even makes things even more interesting because you start in a new area off the beaten path. Items are also in different places now. Mr. X also comes earlier, and pro tip, if you ever do end up playing Resident Evil 2 Remake, especially on the B path, I suggest immediately going and finding all 3 medallions as fast as humanly possible because Mr. X is going to be chasing you the entire time, and if you manage to snag all 3, you can then unlock the basement. Just go down the basement using that elevator and then go right back up again, and it will actually now trick Mr. X into hunting you down there instead. And now he's going to leave you alone in the police department. Now you can explore to your heart's content without filling your diapers while Mr. X hunts you like the Terminator that he is. Everything I just described takes place in a very small area compared to your usual AAA game, but that's also why it makes it so great. Learning the ins and outs of the police department in Resident Evil 2 is awesome. It feels like actual level design, and not something I can say about games like highguard, for example, where the maps are so big and lifeless, there's nothing to remember because it all feels pointless. Also, crazy enough that by the time you see this video, highguard will be nothing but a memory now. You officially cannot play highguard anymore if you're watching this. The game is dead, it's gone offline, and it will never return. One developer who worked on highguard recently returned to social media, as seen here from Eurogamer as well. They apologize for being so hostile towards everyone who didn't enjoy the game, but that's not really framing it the way that it should. You see, Josh Sobel, who worked on highguard, said this as the game shuts down for good. "Since I reactivated my account, I'll address the elephant in the room. My now deleted tweet following the highguard layoffs news a month ago was a mistake. I was stressed, devastated, angry, and running on 2 hours of sleep. It was not wise to take my pain to the internet in that volatile state. I stand by the intent behind much of what I said, but I phrased it poorly and some of my anger was misdirected. I believe the online discourse around highguard had some very dark corners that may have accelerated the timeline of our failure beyond the natural outcome of reasonable critique, but it wasn't the primary cause, and I don't personally believe the ultimate outcome would have been thoroughly different without it. And there's no way to know how it would have gone under different circumstances." Amazing how despite he said his so-called apology, he doesn't actually apologize, since what he says there, he still stands behind the intent of what he said, which means he still, blames all of us for the game failing obviously, but that he phrased it poorly. So he still believes that the game died because of online discourse. So ultimately, despite what happened with highguard, he doesn't believe that he's at fault either way, instead blaming it on the stress. Another game made to be a platform for nothing, likely to refund every purchase that was made on it, and then inevitably be written off as a tax write-off to save some of the money that was spent on it. And this is what happens when the trust is eroded and the promise of a good game is said to come, just not at release like usual with these types of games. Even Eurogamer agrees with that ex-highguard developer that it was cause of you and me that it failed. They said this. But if you ask me, he's right to point out the external forces that always rooted for the game to fail, well before we had access to the thing and evaluated what it actually was. Of course you think that way, Eurogamer, because accountability is kryptonite in the games industry. If the people who rooted for it to fail didn't come back, then why wasn't there enough true believers to replace them? Could it be that there's a shadow cabal of users that destroyed highguard, or was it that no one, not even the common gamer, wanted to play highguard? You see what I mean? They learn nothing. They will continue this broken system thinking that it will just eventually self-correct itself, but it won't. It's not our job to support your broken dreams. It's up to the people who made these sorts of things to ensure that what's being made is worthy of those players' times. Like Slay the Spire 2 did that. Resident Evil continues to do that too. highguard didn't, and they failed. You see, what happened with highguard is exactly what I said earlier in this video. They genuinely do believe that blind loyalty would be enough to get through their launch and succeed in the long term. They believed that they could sell you an unfinished product that was lacking content, but once the data came in and the numbers stopped climbing, it became very clear. People weren't willing to pay for broken dreams and promises anymore. I could only guess the fear that the highguard dev team had behind closed doors, spiraling like crazy in a state of panic, because these formulas they thought would be proven to work have instead collapsed. Like I said, the soulless rot that defined the last decade and then some is finally being rejected. The death of the minimal viable product, if you will, is being removed right before our eyes, and I say thank God, finally, dude. That is what highguard was. With Marathon, all I see is articles gassing that game up while suspiciously ignoring games like Tainted Grail and then some at release. It's pretty obvious what studios are seen as industry darlings and which are loathed by Access Media for not complying. Some games, however, have cracked the code by offering full experiences and adding new content, yet not describing themselves as live service. For example, Space Marine 2. Look at this from IGN. Even the people who made Space Marine 2, they don't see that game as live service because they don't nickel and dime players all of the time. Stuff like new missions and weapons and even the new class they added to the game, the Tech Marine, are completely free if you already own Space Marine 2. The actual content is just added for the price that you paid for the game, which is awesome and how it should be. The only paid DLC in Space Marine 2 is optional cosmetics, but these are obviously not required. So all the content that really matters, if you will, is just included, which again is how it should be. Space Marine 2 has a full campaign as well, something becoming less and less common in shooter games that do tout themselves as live service offerings. highguard could have benefited from some sort of PvE game mode, the same way that Marathon could as well, but they didn't do it. They didn't think it was needed. It's almost as if offering less for more is not a good idea. Tim Willits, that's the chief creative officer at Saber Saber Interactive said as seen here, that live service does not describe what Space Marine 2 is to him and the team, because live service has come with the added meaning of aggressive microtransactions, which he believes the game does not have. So I guess if you can't use live service to describe it, I guess, then the only other word to use for what Space Marine 2 is that it's just a good game. He confirms in the same interview that Space Marine 2's sales are still going very strong too. The game came in 4th place recently in terms of sales. But Tim Willits doesn't actually confirm which storefront that is from exactly, but either way, the game is doing very well. And Space Marine 3 is already on its way, which is awesome to see because this is kind of what we need more of. The game is full price, but it justifies it by giving you enough, and then everything after gameplay-wise is free. Imagine that. Call of Duty, for example, is kind of the worst of both worlds because it's full price, comes out every single year, is also heavily monetized to hell and back, while ruining core features that people love. Black Ops 7 was also a massive misfire, and it's not surprising, but what did they expect? The publishers believed that they could redefine what gaming meant through sheer brute force, that players would just eventually accept a future entirely built around the concept of live service platforms with endless grinds. But that dream is collapsing, thankfully, because unlike the people in charge of making those decisions, the people who buy games didn't forget what the medium was supposed to be. We didn't forget the feeling of playing something special and rewarding games that respected us by buying what they make next too. And now that everyone is collectively demanding excellence again, the publishers who push their studios to make slop are now worried because they kind of forgot how to deliver what people really want now that they're feeling the consequences of their own actions. If you ask me, the golden age of what I would call the broken promise era is over in the video game industry. People no longer want to reward mediocrity, and I really don't blame them. We're no longer tolerating unfinished disasters, and we're not going to pretend that the cynical game design loop somehow is equal to real creativity. For the publishers out here who spent the last decade and then some chasing metrics instead of real craftsmanship, that shift is obviously terrifying for them. And you know what else I'm noticing? A lot of the games that do well, that are in a sense live service as well, also have something in common. They're not PvP focused. A lot of them, Helldivers, Arc Raiders, I guess you could say Space Marine 2, or even games that just aren't live service like your Deep Rock Galactics and then some, they all focus primarily on cooperation and PvE elements instead. Look, I get it, right? That PvP is something that certain crowds still love today. But you'd be pretty stupid to think that somehow the PvP crowd outweighs the size of the PvE ones. Most casuals, the lifeblood of the industry, they engage far more with PvE games. Look at every Nintendo game pretty much ever. Even Mario Kart is kept alive by the casual fans too. I mean, who can blame them? The thing is that for while many of these games are made for a certain demographic of player, the truth is that that demo is so divided by so many games already vying for their attention that it's becoming a miracle if you can even sway anyone to give your game a chance. If highguard was PvE only, it would still exist. I bet money on that, but it wasn't. And now it's gone. The truth is that the games industry refuses to listen because they think that they know better. That through their spreadsheets, it tells them how players act and emote themselves. And if that were true, then why is it that every major success this year is a single-player game while every major failure is a multiplayer one? How nobody saw this coming, it tells me one thing, that their logic and their data is clearly flawed. But they won't ever admit that, because to admit it would mean that they were wrong in the first place. And we both know that nobody likes admitting to such concepts so openly these days. Either way, the numbers are clearly lying, because every multiplayer game to some capacity is flatlining no matter their size or their relevance. Yet the single player or PvE focused games are thriving and having a blast. Because the audience, that's you and me, that they once took for granted, is finally holding them accountable. And the industry has absolutely no idea how to deal with it. What do you think? Let me know. Subscribe if you like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.